Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Virginia City Council Chambers. This is a regularly scheduled committee of the whole meeting. We'll call this meeting to order. Today's date is Tuesday, May 17th, 2022. The time is 9 a.m. We have a full agenda today. We're going to be juggling some things around here to accommodate the scheduling of those who are presenting today and some of the discussions we're going to have. So I'll turn the meeting over to our City Administrator, Britt C. Bennis. Britt?
Thank you. Matt Reed is at a meeting, so we'll go to item number 2, which is Greg Knutson and Devin Segler, Walker, Drew, and Hani, update on the 2021 audit.
Are we going to get the 2-minute version, or are we going to, I'm only teasing.
Maybe the minute version.
Good morning, Greg. Mr. Segler, good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome. Thank you.
Overall overview, we're in the process of finishing everything up as far as what we need to do, deadlines. We're waiting for the numbers from the
Of course.
Okay. Thank you. So we're close to getting all those numbers together too, so everything seems to be doing fine. Our biggest concern right now is the ambulance special revenue fund. It's showing that a loss after a sale of capital assets and as far as revenues and expenditures over revenues, $946,000 as it stands right now. And the fund balance at the beginning of the year is $873, so that actually shows a fund balance deficit. And that compares to the prior year, they actually showed an increase of $374,000. So that is one area that I know that Sherry and the council wants to address specifically. And I'll bring Devin up, have him come up and sort of talk about where that's at, some of the details of that.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor,
Yes.
if I may.
Yeah, please, Julianne. Councilor Paulson.
Thank you. Are there copies of what you have in front of you
Yes.
so we can follow along? Thank you.
I think I made 7 copies.
And one for Pam.
Oh,
Have it.
that's it.
We have it in our email, yes.
Okay, can you make
Yeah.
4 copies?
We also have it sent in our email as well, so
Okay.
thank you.
And the numbers I'm talking about come from the first page on that. Then I have the details on the second page, and then I have the comparison to budget for the prior year, and then the details for the prior year. So we have 2020 and 2021 information on there for comparing to budget and detail, and then for both years.
Thank you, Greg. Mr. Segler?
Good morning.
Good morning.
So I have gone through the ambulance department and tried to figure out, or tried to analytically look at 21 compared to 2020. We've had a lot of difficulty since in 2019, there was the change from Expert T to Transmedic, the billing departments, and they do billing a little bit differently. And then combined with COVID and the city covering other municipalities' emergency runs, it's been really difficult to analyze from one year to the next. Overall, I received some data from the deputy chief and also from Transmedic and tried to analyze how many runs were emergency runs and how many runs were non-emergent runs. And from my understanding, from discussion with the deputy chief, that there's more money to be made in non-emergent runs because you can select and choose which runs will make you more money, as compared to emergent runs where you don't really have an option, you just have to go. And this is still kind of a work in progress, and I want to make sure that I'm thorough in testing and reviewing this emergency revenue. And that's the biggest struggle, is just comparing year to year, because there's not a whole lot of data that's really comparable since they changed from billing services, and then with all the additional stuff that the ambulance department is handling now. So I think, well, that just should be taken into consideration when reviewing the ambulance fund. So I do have some of the data here, and it seems like total emergent runs, which are emergency runs that you're required to go on from the billing agent, they went down, and the non-emergent runs went up, which would indicate to me, well, revenue should be increasing. Depending on what type of run you're taking on. So, I mean, I don't know if I'm talking in circles, but you can understand why it's difficult to analyze from year to year. And I don't know if that's something that the council would like us to look into further or test further, or if you had, back in 2020, I know you added a lot of personnel in the ambulance department and a lot of equipment. And I don't know if that was the intention, to go on more runs and to cover more area, which then I would think revenue wouldn't be increasing. So I guess that's one area where maybe I would like feedback of whether we should be looking into that more, or what have you. I guess that's all I really had. Greg, did you have any more on the funds? I know that everybody has copies.
Can we ask questions before Greg gets
Oh,
up?
absolutely.
I've got a question for you, if I may, Mayor. Well, are you
Go
going to
ahead.
sit there and not let us talk today?
Yes, but I was just going to use, Counselor Bear, we're just going to use the protocol, whose light was on first, and then go all the
I
way
put my
around.
hand up a long time ago first, okay?
What
I don't mean to be pissy.
Go ahead, Counselor Bear,
Okay.
no, just go ahead.
There
Go
are
ahead
some
and ask your
important
questions.
questions, there's some
Yeah.
important questions.
Please,
I do
please,
not,
please
I do not,
continue.
from looking at stuff, believe these
go ahead.
numbers are correct.
Go ahead.
Number one, I've been around a long time. You have a 60 to 90-day backlog where you don't get reimbursed. Have those been taken into consideration from the insurance companies?
Yes.
With the billing service, where is that number? I didn't see that number in this unless I missed it.
The 60 to 90 days would be taken into account with accounts receivable. So I tried analytically looking at both. So basically your cash receipts, and then your total revenue, which takes into account the receivable in that 60 to 90 days. So basically, what I'm trying to do is go straight with your cash number to do the analytics.
Yeah, because these aren't the numbers we looked at when we did our budget process. We had over $3 million in budgeted receivables that were going to come in when we did our original budget in 2021 for 22. Now, we pick up dollars in the end. You know, you got a big dollar value in your, whatchamacallit, trying to think of the word, we pull in what it's worth, okay? The system and stuff. We got equipment, but are the grants taken into consideration in this too? Because we got a bunch of grants last year, and
Yeah,
year.
any grants related to the ambulance would be in the ambulance fund.
we don't have a choice of the 911 system we're in. We can't get out of that. That's state mandated.
Exactly, yep.
And we've got 504 primary miles and over 900, almost 1,000 secondary miles. What is the percentage of reimbursement we're getting through the billing service? What is it, 40%?
Yeah,
39%?
so I talked with Beth from Transmedic, and I asked her, because that was one of the differences from the old billing agency to the new billing agency. The new billing agency, roughly, they'll charge, what was it, like around $7 million for billings. But they would only receive maybe 40% of that because it's all
Right.
written down from Medicare. I mean, you bill $1,000, you're only gonna get 400 bucks.
It's 365, yeah.
Right. And the old billing agency would take that into account with their billing, so they would only bill out what they were expected to get, because they knew that they weren't gonna collect the whole amount. And that's some of the difficulty that I'm having analyzing from year to year, because the two billing agencies don't necessarily bill the same way.
So is this a billing problem with the agency we're currently having, or we need to look at
No.
switching again?
No, I don't, it's just a different way that they're billing. And regardless, either way, the city's only collecting what they collect.
39, 40%.
You're right, exactly. Whereas the old billing agency, it was more like 90%, but they were already writing off that big chunk that they knew they weren't gonna get before they even billed
So
it.
basically, what you're telling us, that our costs of operating that department are going up, get everything from fuel to equipment to whatnot with all this COVID stuff that was going on.
Oh, yeah.
Everything's gone up on a basis of us having interest and stuff and on everything going up. Especially this year now where everything's gone up 10% or better.
Oh, yeah, inflation for sure, yeah.
So that's accounting for some of our loss in here too, correct?
Yeah, I would think
Is there an
so.
estimate on that someplace? What that actually is, what the interest has cost us on supplies and stuff like that, where we've lost more dollars because we have to pay more?
Well, I
Didn't hear
think,
any place?
like with Greg's funds, the financials will probably show that from year to year. You can see your expenditures. And you're gonna have typical operating expenditures, and you probably look at that from year to year and get a rough estimate of how much supplies have gone up.
One of the issues that I have is the fact that if we can't cut back people, okay? We've got just too many runs. We had 4,600 runs last year, and stuff on that. Some of these are no-cost runs, period. When somebody doesn't want to be transported, you lose. You don't
Right.
gain.
And that's where some of this analytical comes in too. When I look at runs, like, well, the number was given from the deputy chief, it was 3,900 in 2021, and in 2020, it was 3,788. So it's a 3% increase in runs, but that includes runs that you don't make money on, that the patient doesn't want to go. And then when I turned around and looked at Transmedic, their non-emergent runs went down by 1 to 3%. So I mean, did the ambulance runs during COVID increase, but patients didn't want to be taken by ambulance? That's some of the analytical that I'm having a difficult time pinpointing.
And then where did I get the idea from the literature I've read that we had 4,600 runs last year? I mean, where's, from 3,900 to 46, where's the other 700?
That's kind of the same questions I have.
Well, we need to know that, because that's important for us as counselors to know
Yeah,
what
and-
happened to the other 700 runs. If we had them recorded, did you go through all their logbooks, everything, where they had their runs? Do they match up? I'm concerned
That's-
about that, or look at the computer runs.
Would you come forward,
I think that
Challenge
number
Chief.
of 4,600 calls probably included fire calls and miscellaneous rescues.
Was it
stuff
fire
like
calls
that.
in there also?
I believe so.
Well, it doesn't make any
I
difference.
don't have the numbers and I haven't seen
Doesn't
them.
really
but I-
make any difference, because one way that we're financing the department, those runs together, it's a combined department, let's face it. You gotta include everything, and we should be including them together down the run, broken down, but together for the totals.
Sure.
You know, you want them separate, but you want a total, so you get a really true picture of this. That's sort of my issue.
I believe the fire calls don't go through Transmedic.
Right, correct, and you're absolutely right.
They go-
4,600 probably does include,
Yeah, would you stand up so the general public can hear? Thank you, Mr. Segler.
I think that's exactly right. The 4,600 probably did include fire ambulance calls. So the number, the 3,900 number that I got for 2021 was EMS, and I don't believe that would include fire calls. And obviously, the numbers that I'm taking from Transmedic, your billing agency, wouldn't include fire calls because that's strictly for ambulance runs that you've billed.
So what you're telling us, all the fire runs in are reimbursements are gotten through insurance, et cetera, that way for revenue? Because we got to get money out of these insurances, and we hold 25% of their dollars if there's a fire.
Yeah,
They got insurance.
yeah, and that's something, please
How
come
does
on.
that get put into the equation?
Also, probably not included in those numbers are the non-billable calls like lift assists and calls like that, or false calls or canceled calls, which wouldn't have gone to
I know
transit,
you lose money on those, you don't.
right,
make
which
any-
wouldn't be included in those numbers. The 4,600 number is calls that were dispatched out to, I would assume. The numbers here would constitute probably what was sent to billing or what was.
Okay, how many diversionary runs did we have last year that we lost on? Because those are runs that we have to do something about, because we've got the facilities and hospitals, et cetera, that are doing and putting stuff on divert when we still have equipment there that can run. And that's bothering me big time. You know how many diversion runs we had, Mr. Martinson, in the end? You have them though? They are grown, yes. Okay, all right, thank you. That's all I need.
Okay, so you can only report on the data we provide you.
Exactly, yep.
So, and if we have to vet out all these things, like Counselor Bearable was looking for these answers that you can't provide because you don't have the data that's presented to you. We only work with that data. So we as a council, in your earlier conversation was, we should probably take a look at maybe looking into that with more detail with respect to that prior to your final presentation on your audit is, so I think that we would be asking you to do that most likely. So thank you. Counselor, I want you to go ahead, Mr. Zegler, and then we'll go over to Counselor Paulson.
Well, yeah, absolutely, and so like the data that's given to us, some of it comes from the fire department or the chief.
Right.
And then some of it comes from Transmedic, so basically reconciling the two, and then I know Transmedic, I talked with Beth at Transmedic, and she said they're actually working, because she provided me with detail of breaking out non-emergent and emergent runs for EMS, and that's helpful because, like I said before, you're able to make more money on non-emergent runs because you can pick and choose, whereas the emergent runs, you have to go on those regardless.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Segler. Counselor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, so I think my question or my discussion would be going more in depth with what,
Yeah.
you know, kind of, I don't know, or you're just here to basically present the deficit right now, and then we'll probably have some conversations going forward and I guess drilling down on the reconciliation. Is that kind of what you're saying this morning?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's worth looking into a little bit further, and just to see if that's playing into the deficit, really.
I know in the past that data is readily available from the previous fire chief, always had that data available regarding emergent runs and non-emergent runs. So were you provided that data when comparing to the trends?
That's where I believe he received that information, because I think Beth at Transmedic sent me the same reports, and she only had reports for 2021 broken out that way, but I was able to get 2020 reports and break them out just for comparison purposes. And as Councilor Baraboo had mentioned about the 4,600, that's where I'm trying to pinpoint 4,600. Okay, how much of that is EMS, and how much of that went through Transmedic?
And I know in the past, though, that the previous fire chief had provided that. He had a system that actually plugged in those numbers immediately and would produce.
Okay.
So I'm not sure why that information wasn't brought forward. Did you not receive that information?
No, all the information that we received was EMS runs and then the Transmedic reports that we requested.
And is that something, Battalion Chief, that we could have provided to them? So when we do have this discussion going forward, we understand the differentiation between the non-emergent, emergent, canceled, fire runs, that should be able to be extrapolated from.
It was very accessible prior to Chief's departure. I don't know what Deputy Chief Frederickson has access to since he's left.
So, but these reports should have been provided prior to our previous chief.
I would agree to that. If you haven't
Leaving the
received
department.
those, I have no idea where they are or any of that. What Deputy Chief Frederickson has given you, I would assume, is all that he has. I don't know anything other than that.
Okay, so maybe this is a question for Sherry. Was that information provided as you began the audit?
The auditors send us a list of requests every year. So the former chief was on board at the time the audit was being conducted.
Correct.
So as far as per se, I'd have to ask Devin in that. But to get the actual runs, it's probably best to go right to Transmedic and not someone's report so that you get the exact breakdown. What's being charged and not charged.
I think that's what we're trying to get at here, right?
Right, I'm
Counselor
just trying to
Paulson?
understand, because typically that information is provided annually to Walker Drew, isn't that correct? Isn't that how we reconcile?
Yeah, and looking at it analytically, so that's one of the things that I'm looking at now is trying to understand, well, runs went up by 3%, and that agrees with what the chief has told us and the EMS report that we get, and then also with the Transmedic reports. But like I mentioned before, some of the difficulty in that was the change of service provider or billing providers, and then also COVID, because it just, it complicated everything, really.
No, and I understand the circumstances have changed. I'm just saying the way in which the data has been given to you guys in the past has been the same every time. So I'm just curious as to, was that information not provided this time in order
No,
to reconcile with Transmedic?
I think like Sherry, well, I don't know if we've ever really reconciled from the chief's reports to Transmedic. Because when you analyze the revenue, if it's making sense and it's reasonable, then there's no real need to look into it further. Where now, I mean, you can kind of see a little bit of a difference, and so it makes sense to dig into it further and
Okay,
figure out those
I think
reconciliations.
this really warrants a really lengthy conversation going forward, but I really feel that the whomever has access to that in the fire department, that it would be critical that the Transmedic information and the information that that department would have would mirror each other, because when the city's planning for budgetary reasons or the department head is planning for budgets, future budgets, I think that data is extremely important, that they make sense with one another. Otherwise, how can you plan for capital outlay or employee, outlay for employees? So I don't know what that might look like, but in terms of having a conversation, I think it's important that we get, especially when you look at this is it $964,000 or $998,000 deficit? There's the actual amounts, and then there's a variance final budget.
946 is the actual.
946, okay.
The number on the right is comparison to budget. So where the 980 comes from, it was actually budgeted to have an increase of 34,000, You compare that to the 946 deficit, the difference is 980,000,
Okay,
just so you understand it.
thank you. I appreciate that, and I didn't mean to go on, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Paulson. So you're here to give us an update as the progress of this report. And you're going to be giving us a final, complete audit report at another meeting. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mayor.
So you came here to give us an information on the progress that you're making at this point in time, but needed to point out one of the issues that's a glaring in the audit report moving forward, and that's this ambulance fund. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you'll be looking, dig into it and deeper into getting some more information with respect to that. So when you come back for your final report, you'll have more information for us regarding this fund.
I hope so.
I hope so too. Thank you. Councilor Johnson.
The one question that I guess I'd like to look into is, I'm guessing that the 500 on page 98, the 502, 280 is an ambulance or two, as a capital or as a vehicle expenditure. And my question is I thought one of them wouldn't be into the budget till next year, and one of them was grant funded. So I just would like to make sure, as you're looking, that the expenditure and the income we didn't track the income in one year and we're spending it in the next year. And if that's what happened, that there's a note about that. So because I can't imagine us agreeing to spend $500,000 in a year we know we didn't have. So I want to make sure that if that's what some of this difference is that it's just noted in the notes at the end or start or something, because that just looks, that's half of the $900,000. So I just would like that specific looked at and explained if that'd be
Right.
possible.
Right, and we'll review that. And I was going to bring that up as, because if you look at the last page, there's only 35,000 in equipment capital outlay, and you compare that to the 504,980, which 502,000 is of the vehicles on the second page. It's a big reason why that there was because of the purchase of ambulance. So,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Councilor Bearable.
Well, this is going to be quick, Larry. I understand you guys got to go to more, but no place in this report do I find out, we got a whole pile of COVID money and stuff from the feds and the state. How come that's not recorded in revenue on these sheets that I can see? I don't see it anyplace unless you got it further in your report coming up. Because we got a whole pile of money from, that's to finance these things, and that's what money was used. Where is it on this? I don't see any revenues for COVID from the feds or the state in this report. That's a big loss of dollars that you're showing on this report.
That was all recognized in the prior year, that COVID money. And the amount of money that you got this year in COVID was all deferred and hasn't been expended yet. So you got the revenue in, but it's been
Well, why
deferred.
doesn't that revenue show up then anyplace in this? Because that revenue has not been expended. It should show up someplace. If my math and my skills, all the years that I spent in the pharmacy business, you got to show this. If the money's there, sitting there, you don't just disappear, the money.
No, it's setting up deferred and moved on to the,
So these expenses are bogus then, basically if we got money sitting there someplace.
Councilor Baraboo, on page 98 of the handout they gave you, at the very top, it does say intergovernmental federal grants, state, which is the COVID-19 response funding grant.
We got a lot more money than that.
It's because yes, that's what we spent that year, because we had to defer the rest of the money we held for the ambulances to 2021.
That's still not answering my question. My question is, then how do we keep track of that still belongs to the ambulance service and stuff, that deferred dollars, if there's such a thing? We need a report on that too. I'm not gonna say a word until they bring back some more information. Because this is not a good report that I can see.
I think if I may, Mr. Knudsen and Mr. Segler, this is a preliminary estimate of a glaring example of what could be a problematic as the audit moves forward. And as you look at the revenue streams and the final audit report, and you dig into the rest of this as requested, because you're just pointing out the fact you're giving us heads up. This is something, so in the final report, we're not surprised by what's going on. And so in answer to Councilor Bearable's and everybody else's question, hopefully those questions will be answered, everything will be out in the final audit report. It will show the expenditures that were expended and what was carried over into the following year. And even though these figures are based upon the raw data that you have now, expenditures to overcome that may come from other revenue streams we haven't spent yet. So I think that's important distinction to make as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, thank you very much.
And I want to point out that the information on the sheet is exactly what the city's records are showing right now as preliminary audited. So it's not like any of these numbers are made up or anything.
Right. And I think we understand that too. So is there anything else that you think you need to report to us prior to your final stretch here to prevent a full audit report to us?
No, not at this time.
Okay, thank you. But before you leave, we might have some other questions from the council. So we'll look around. Councilor Beyondich.
And thank you for providing this, and I totally understand you're working with the numbers you're giving. In response to Councilor Baraboo, this may be discussion that the council could have as a finance meeting, so we could understand where the numbers are, and the questions that you have could be answered at that.
Yeah, and I think we'll have those answers a little bit more thorough and the final audit report. I think they're here today, Walker Jew, to point out one of the anomalies in our audit report and some of the concern they have to date. And so I think that would be, once we get all that information together, if it's information that we have to have a special meeting with finance or whatever the case may be, as indicated by Councilor Paulson, we could certainly do that.
Would we wait until the audit is complete?
Well, I think it would be wise to do that. Britt, I think it would be wise to wait until all the figures in. Maybe there's some additional information that might be forthcoming that would be pertinent to the discussion we're having today. So once the final audit comes in, make that presentation. I think that's the time to drill down and ask those big questions. And maybe if those deficit is not contrite enough for us, then maybe we'll have to take a look at having a special meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Beyondich.
Mayor,
Now, is there anything else before we move on to the next time on the agenda? Councilor Bearaboo?
Yeah, Mayor, I just want to apologize to the council and to Walker Judah and Hani. I just got a little upset about some of the stuff that I saw. So I owe you guys all an apology, including our council, because I got upset about this, because I am used to doing big business when I was in private business, and I mean millions of dollars worth. And when I see reports like this, and I don't see that they're finished, I get upset. So I want to give you guys an apology. Once I see the final numbers, I'll probably be happier.
And we'll follow up on those COVID-19 numbers to make sure that they're being recognized properly too. But, okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the council or staff for Walker Drew at this point? Mr. Knudsen, Mr. Segler, thank you very much for coming in. We look forward to the final audit report and potentially some additional information regarding this ambulance issue. Thank you very much. Britt? Matt, how long do you think this will take you? Minute or two? Okay, I know that we have Mr. Honkinen here with respect to item number 14 on this, so if we just take a minute, we'll have you guys call Matt up.
Matt Reed, SEH, reviewing the 2023-2025 feasibility report and the resolution receiving the report and calling for a public hearing on a local improvement project.
Matt, good morning.
Good morning. I apologize for being late. I was dealing with a water service leak over in Pine Mill Court, and I got running a little late, so.
Sure, sir.
That's
Thank
under
you.
control. Ellie's handing out the feasibility report for the 2023-25, i.e. what we've been calling Phase 2 of our street and infrastructure project.
Thank you.
This is really the first step in the process of getting this project going again. So we have completed the feasibility report. It's got all of the information in it, the cost estimates, things like that. As the mayor indicated, or Britt, whichever one of you guys were reading off the agenda, that we do need to hold an improvement hearing And I think the date that's been proposed is June 20th at 5:30 here at City Hall. Are we going to try to do it here? Do it at the MAC, okay. At MAC. Yeah, at MAC, okay. So I can certainly answer any questions if anybody has any. It's obviously a pretty thick book. There's a lot of information in it, but I can certainly answer any questions you might have.
Okay, I think the purpose of this, and correct me if I'm not accurate, that where we are, the resolution is to receive the feasibility report and to set a hearing for the suggested date of 5:30 PM or 5 PM, whenever the date is, on June 20th, the Iron Trail Motors Event Center. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, looking for council action. Councilor Freely moves to receive the feasibility report and to set a hearing date for June 20th at the Iron Trail Motors Event Center at what time?
5:30.
At 5:30 PM. Is there support for that?
I'll support, Mayor.
Support by Councilor Bearable. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it very much.
I just want to make a note that the Public Utilities will also be doing a resolution for this feasibility report, accepting it and approving the project.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you. Item number 14, update on the golf course lease.
Okay. All right, let's take a look. We have the representative for the Northern Divide, legal representative, Mr. Eric Honkinen, at the podium as well. So first of all, as we take a look at that, I'm going to ask our city attorney for some additional information or just a little synopsis of the update on the lease as we're looking at it. So, Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Mayor. Following the last regular meeting, there was a directive by the council to update the language. The offer was rescinded and reissued with some amended language. I did make that amendment. Unfortunately, I didn't get the draft copy over to Mr. Honkinen until yesterday, so I apologize for that. But I do understand that Mr. Honkinen did observe or did watch that meeting and has the kind of the context of the background of what that change was. And specifically, the change that was included, I added 19 words to the lease, was the only amendment, and it came after the description of Exhibit A. And those words were provided, however, that the city shall have the use and possession of the pro shop space during the golf season. And that was to clarify, the Exhibit A that was provided included the full area, including the pro shop, because that pro shop area is used by the restaurant or available to the restaurant for a majority of the year, except for the golf season, which runs approximately from May until October. And so we just made that exception so that everything would be in line and we wouldn't end up renting back the pro shop from the Northern Divide. And other than that, all of the same terms exist as were in the previous offer.
Thank you, Mr. Lindsay. Mr. Honkinen?
Thank you. I did have the opportunity over the weekend actually to watch the May 3rd and May 10th meeting, and just to address some of the things that I saw in that. Just note that the first time that we actually received a full completed offer was on May 5th in this matter. And then I would forward that to my client, but didn't have the ability to review it until May 10th, which was the day of your last meeting. But that's where I spoke to my client first and then called Mr. Lindsay with regard to like the lease that was provided to us. And you know, I told my clients, I was like, go ahead and sign it because then they're going to be renting from you. And we're going to end up with like probably around a $3,000 a month lease payment. So based on what we had, I also said to my clients, I was like, that's probably going to cause an extraordinary amount of conflict that's not necessary. And so by their grace, I contacted Brian afterwards, said, well, this is a problem here. And so I've had the ability, I don't have any formal authority to make any counteroffers or reject anything. My clients were wondering kind of like how with regard to the 3750 number, how or why that was a 25% increase. Because even if there was a 2% increase over the course of 3 and going into a 4th year, the amount would be 3183.62. So that they were wondering about that to even accomplish something like if they were to do a yearly increase of that amount, it would be at almost $500 or more, a little bit less, 560, 70. And so that was one of the things that they're trying to do. I do think that we are getting closer. And I know that this can be frustrating in this, but I think that we're moving towards coming to a resolution on this. I do know that my clients are like highly disinclined to do any kind of like yearly increase. So they would like to have one set amount of like what the rent would be. I do think that part of, in watching the meeting for Councilor Johnson, I thought that in an attempt to try to get the Exhibit A to reflect kind of what the usable space was, it kind of opened up the issue of why we had the Exhibit A in the original lease to be just essentially that 1,100 square feet, because we would run into this issue of like, you know, there's different people using it at different times, and so that's the reason actually you kind of probably stumbled upon it of why we did the original Exhibit A. Nonetheless, it's understood that we're trying to get to that so that we can accomplish exactly what you're saying is the intent. I think that with regard to that, and this is something that Mr. Lindsay and I can discuss, is that we would conform also the liability language to the use of those areas. Also, like one of the things that my client was concerned about is like for like the outdoor area, it's like if there's league night that, you know, the outdoor area is being used by the league, but not necessarily the restaurant. It's like where would a liability issue fall on that? And that's just kind of part of the nuance that we get in on this. However, I do believe that that issue can be easily resolved between council. Also with regard to, there was a talk of like a eviction. I don't believe that there's been a default to constitute an eviction under the lease. So anyway, I think that we're getting closer, and like I said, I just got this yesterday, and I know that and I did watch over the weekend what it was, and I understand what the council's trying to do. You know, I just think that, like I said, my clients are very disinclined to doing an additional percentage rent increase year on year. But I do think that we're getting closer in terms of a full resolution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And before we go to Councilor Johnson, you know, I don't want to publicly, as we've done, this has been a very convoluted matter. It's been a very controversial matter. I think it's been a matter that, you know, could have been resolved earlier, but circumstances dictate that it wasn't. So as far as negotiating anything with respect to the lease or making adjustments to the lease or whatever, what have you, has to go between the representative of the Northern Divine, which is Mr. Honkanen, and our city attorney, we've charged to negotiate, is Mr. Lindsay. So all of those information that you provide to us, Mr. Honkanen, would be something to be disseminated to Mr. Lindsay to take a look at it, and he would present that to us, and then we can make a determination from there. But as far as negotiating anything and picking at this language, the lease, and that language, what's liability, what's not, that all comes from a negotiation process that we have currently in place to get through our city attorney and in you as well, and your clients, Mr. Honkanen. And then at that time, a recommendation comes forth, and then we discuss that agreement or lack of agreement and what the issues are with respect to that, and then we go into a session to discuss that. So that's kind of the process I like to see moving forward. I don't like to see a public discussion about you know, the semantics of this or the of that. This is negotiations, you know, 101, and when we get that negotiation, it comes to us, and then we make a decision one way or the other. So I hope that that's the way we're going to move forward with this, whether it's at a snail's pace or not. But you know, we have made some accommodations for timelines, and we're continuing to abide by and in good faith try to negotiate a lease agreement through the proper channels. Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I respectfully disagree with you. My understanding is that our last lease was our final offer, and we clarified the language about the space being rental or the leasing space. All of these other concerns should have been brought forth prior to today. Everything you're talking about is in the first offer, it's in the last offer. Again, I'll say this is stall tactics. I don't like it. I'm not going to move to do anything differently. It's there. This is the lease. Your folks have an option to accept it or not. It was my understanding that you all noticed the disagreement or the the mistake with defining the pro shop. We clarified that language at the last meeting. Everything else in the contract is what we thought we were offering, final offer. So this has gone on way too long. And again, your clients have an option to either accept or deny, and that can be it. But I think we're through negotiating. I think we've already done that. That's my perspective, and I will not support anything other than what we discussed at our last meeting and approved.
Thank you, Councilor Johnson. Councilor Beyondich?
Thank you. And I'm really confused. At our meeting, the last meeting where we discussed all this, I clarified when I did the second on the motion that this would be delivered the next day. So I'm just disappointed that it just got delivered yesterday. I clarified that with Colleen and made sure, because that hinged on the motion that was made, and I wanted that information out as soon as possible. So I'm disappointed that it took that long to get it delivered, that it was just sent out yesterday. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any clarification, Mr. Lindsay?
Thank you, Your Honor. I apologize to council. That was, the delay in delivering that was on me. But I want to speak just briefly to the liability piece. I don't think that that's an additional issue here. Whether the outdoor space is being used, the coverage or the liability piece follows the use. I assume on a league night, the bar would still be open, and that folks would still be enjoying some beverages out in that space. And so long as that's happening, I think it's appropriate that the liquor liability coverage would follow out to that space. If there's no bar restaurant activities at all occurring, then obviously the golf operations are covered under the city's general liability policy. So liability in either event there, I don't think is a new concern or is undealt with by the current agreement.
Okay, thank you. So any other questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing and seeing none. Councilor Baraboo.
I've got a last minute thing here. I think we need to continue with some of this negotiated stuff in a closed session yet, because I don't think it's completely satisfiable to me as an individual. Even though I went along with I believe I did, I can't remember if I was a no vote on that last resolution or not. I was to begin with, and I think I acquiesced to letting it go through. But there's more than just this, okay? There's a community issue involved with this restaurant. If we go and jack stuff up too high in this situation, and I don't care what you guys want to say about this, but you got to remember, inflation right now for restaurants and stuff is 10 to 20% across the nation right now. Now, how can a restaurant make up the loss in that without raising their prices, so it prices us out of the market, so that restaurant business will go down and we'll lose more money on it? Start thinking about that. I think it was reasonable. My understanding was that $3,700 that we're looking at per month, I thought that was a negotiable issue that we're going to talk about with Mr. Lindsay and Mr. Honkinen with his clients. Why can't we put everybody in one room and close the meeting and get it done? I don't see any reason you can't do that, because they're both privy to the same information in the end. That's my philosophy on this. I'm not going to go along with anymore with that $37.50 or whatever the price was, because I think it's unfair to any businesses renting space from the city of Virginia. That space without rental is worth nothing.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Baraboo. We do have a motion on we do have a motion in a second to that being our final offer with respect to that. No, at the last meeting, we at the last meeting. At the last meeting. Okay, thank you. At the last meeting. And so it was a final offer. And then because there was a discovery, that was rescinded because of the space that was brought up with respect to the golf course thing, that's been amended. That's we took care of that. So now we have before us this lease agreement. We have to take final action on it. We've already taken action on it. We haven't got a response back yet from the Kerrfelds and the legal representative because they just got the final thing yesterday. So we're going to have to take action on this one way or the other. And maybe there'll be further discussion at the council meeting. I don't know where that's going to go. But we have the final offer on the table, right? And
I didn't realize that this was the absolute final offer.
well, there was a motion made and a second at either if it was the last council meeting or before, but that the motion that we made to make the adjustment to this lease space, that was a question that your client had. And then we rescinded the offer and amended that lease space to clarify that. And that was the final offer. That's what we voted for. So that's where we're at right now. Yeah, that's where we're at right now. So thank you. Anything else on this lease agreement?
Nothing.
Anything from the council? Okay, and you'll disseminate that, knowing now that's the final offer, then you know. Yeah, May 20th by midnight is if we extended that date for acceptance or not, May the 20th at midnight. That was also a motion that was made at the council meeting as well. So information for you and your client moving forward, so.
That's the final vote, isn't it, Mayor, on this whole issue on the 20th?
Well, we've already voted on it. We've already had, this final offer's already been disseminated with that minor adjustment to the lease space. And
Still got to vote one more time, don't we?
no. We do not. That's the motion.
That's not right. Go do your research on all these things.
Yeah. Okay, so. Well, then if the offer isn't accepted, then we go to the next step in the process.
So the next step is to go out to look for somebody else then, correct?
Well, that's one of the options we have, yes.
Then you lose a whole summer's worth of stuff going on there. Boy, that doesn't make sense to me.
Well, there's a clause in the contract that triggers that. We have other options within the confines of that contract. So moving forward, is that correct, Mr. Lindsay?
The the practical issue that you run into is just turning the space over. The next step is from a legal perspective. The next step would be to recover possession of the space, and then from there, we would need to find a vendor who would be willing and able to get in there and provide the service.
Right. So thank you. So. Well, whatever options you choose to pursue, Mr. Honkinen, we'll respond in kind, so. Or you. Correct. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Anything else on this item, this subject matter? Okay, thank you, Britt.
Thank you. Back up to item number 3, request from Peace United Methodist Church, 303 9th Avenue South for handicap parking. They're looking for an additional handicap spot on 9th Avenue and a designated handicap loading and unloading area on the curb cut.
It's noted that they already have 2 already there. Is that correct? Okay, thank you.
Convert one of the existing ones to unloading and unloading, and then add another one in place of that one they just took out.
Okay, thank you. I know there's some statutory issues with respect to handicap parking. And we all know who can park there and who can't. Anybody who's handicapped park there, regardless of they're going to church or not, if it's a handicap designated area, loading and unloading area on the curb cut, a designated handicap loading, unloading. So, I mean, they can regulate that too. So, I mean, do we want a loading and unloading zone and these 2 handicap spots? I think I would refer to Councilor Baraboo. Well, Councilor Johnson has light on. Councilor Johnson.
Mayor, I guess I'd like more information about why they feel this is necessary. The request is very brief. This particular building has an entire parking lot. There's also parking on a corner lot. There's also parking on the other side. So I guess I would like to have more information and then maybe a little bit of research as to other churches that have street frontage and what do we provide for, I want to be consistent throughout town. If all the churches in town have accessible spots in front of them and what that would look like if those requests should start coming in. Thank you.
Pam?
Thank you, Mayor. I did speak with Mr. Paul Weir regarding his request, and I did note that he had already 2 handicap spots there, but they just wanted an additional one for extra. And the designated handicap is just for people that need to drop off. They wouldn't be parking there, so they wanted a designation in front of the church in that curb cut area that just is a sign that says loading and unloading handicap, but it's not for parking. So,
And that's for during church hours where
During
they don't
church,
want
correct.
somebody to park there and then not being able to get handicap unloaded into the curb area if they have wheelchair accessibility.
Correct.
Okay, so I think Councilor Johnson is asking that we do a little more research to find out what we do with the other churches, and maybe it might be prudent for us to have a motion to direct staff to take a look at this and come back with a recommendation. So anybody else? Councilor Johnson?
I'll move staff to do a little bit more research on this, and then maybe it needs to go to our streets and alleys maybe there needs to be a policy moving forward on how we address this. My concern is that of all the 20-some churches we have in Virginia, that everybody, and if that's what we're gonna do, that's cool. I'm fine with designating in front of every church, but I would like to make sure we're consistent on that. So I move to more research and then to streets and alleys for a recommendation.
Okay, so motion by Councilor Johnson, is there support?
I'm going to support for just one piece of discussion. Mayor.
Support by Councilor Baraboo for further discussion. Councilor Baraboo?
Yeah, I've been in that church a number of times, but I can't remember the back part whether they have an elevator going from that lower section to the upper section. I don't believe they do, so that eliminates putting handicapped behind or them doing their own handicap behind at this point. So I agree we should take a little harder look at this. Knowing what happens, you have people that park in non-handicapped spots all the time without stickers, without anything around this community. Watch sometimes in lots how they park and on the streets. And unless they get a ticket, they just stay there. So we'll look at that again through Street and Alley, Mayor.
And you know, there's a difference between physically challenged mobile citizens and those who are wheelchair bound. So there's a big difference there. So it has been moved and supported to have staff take a look at this and refer back. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries. Thank you.
Item number 4 is the review the proposals for the City Hall control upgrades. As you recall, when we were working on the budget last year, we did have Kurt Kessinen remind us that we needed to finish upgrading the pneumatics and the controls at City Hall. So we did budget for this.
And are the proposals within budget? Please, would you, Sherry? Thank you.
Sorry, Mayor and Council. The top one, I think, was 149,000. I budgeted 100,000, so, and then the other one is 133.
33,626.
So, you're looking at $30,000 to $40,000 more. And hey, inflation, you name it, whatever you wanna, has hit.
Okay, thank you. Council? Councilor Beyondich?
So where would the additional funds be coming from?
Sherry, can you give us an idea of how we can utilize the budget effectively to accommodate the increase?
I have $92,000 left in the contingency fund. There's also, not the CARES fund, but there's also some other funds that we will be looking into.
Mayor, if I may,
Yes, Britt?
these are actively leaking joints and valves. So the savings in utility cost are also going to help offset this because we are literally pouring steam out because they're leaking. So the amount of steam we'll use will go down immediately as soon as we get the valves replaced.
Anything else, Counselor Beyondich? Okay, thank you. Counselor Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. And if I remember right, these will also now be able to be networked, so when there's a problem, we
Yes.
can pinpoint exactly where the problem is, thus saving us money when there's leaks.
That's why it's a little more expensive, just a regular old valve replacement. These are adding it to our system, so it will notify Kurt via his computer when something's wrong. If it starts leaking at valve number 38, he'll get a notice, valve 38 is having a problem, we need to go check it. And so it adds it to the pneumatic system that we have.
And as far as the wall mounts, those will be also,
Those are already on. Yep, those are on our system. It's getting those valves that are,
Okay.
it's the last piece was the actual valves in the building, getting those part of the system.
perfect. I appreciate that. I will move 133,626 to UHL as a low bidder to complete this project.
Okay, the meeting notice was to review the proposals, and we now have a motion. We have reviewed them, and there's a motion on the floor by Counselor Johnson to move forward with the control, City Hall control upgrades, finishing up the upgrades, actually. Is there support for that?
I'll support, Mayor.
Support by Counselor Bearable. Is there any further discussion? Counselor Beyondich?
you. So these parts will need to be ordered? Are we locked into a price so we know exactly what it will cost?
Once we
That's
sign
what's
the
on-
agreement, that's our price.
Okay, and is it this agreement here, or is there going to be a different one coming forward?
This agreement here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. I would have liked to have seen the breakdown exactly of the valve replacements and then the connection to the computer system. Just in light of what we are just going through with the audit, I'm not comfortable moving forward with anything above and beyond what's in our budget. So I would rather see a breakdown. So if we needed to remove some items, we would in fact have the ability to do that, to stay within budget. So at this point in time, I won't be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Paulson. It has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion?
We'll go ahead on that side.
No. Counselor Bearable, you're the only one with the light on.
Yeah, part of this is our own doing on this by not accepting the bids when they should have been done last year. Of course, they're going to increase the cost with the inflation that's going on right now on this issue. But the savings in the long run will more than make up this. We've seen that already in the utilities with lights and everything else around the city on this. I can't see sitting on this saying, we had all the information earlier except the final price on this. It was all broken down when we did this last year. So I'm going to support this motion.
Thank you, Counselor Bearable. It has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Counselor Beyondich, and then back over to Counselor Paulson. Counselor Beyondich.
Thank you. It wouldn't be difficult to get that information to us, would it?
I can get it back. It came up with the Amoresco project, so this has been worked on for the last 2 years. So I'll find the information from the Amoresco project where we left off on this, and then move
So
forward.
it's basically just a continuation of that, so you
We
would
held
be...
off last year because we didn't have the funds. So we budgeted it for this year. Now, because of the cost of everything going up, the price went up.
And I guess what I'm trying to get at is to clarify what Counselor Paulson is asking for. That information could be sent to us right away.
I will find it and get it back to you guys.
Okay, thank you.
And just remember, this is a motion, which has been moved, has been supported, to move this to the next council agenda for final council action, so we could have any information that's requested brought to us prior to that meeting. But I don't want to hold it up at this level if we have more information, that's fine. But so it has been moved and supported to move this forward. Is there any further discussion? Counselor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I should have asked, is this part of the Amoresco project? in the original budget or not?
We had, at the time when Amoresco was done, they said, we got everything done except for these valves. We got a price. We said, ooh, that's not, we don't have any money this year. We didn't budget for it. Let's go to next year. So now we're in next year. Here we are again with the new prices.
So this is still under Amoresco's budget, so there should be information out there that would provide us the cost savings for utilities? Because,
Was not included in the Amoresco project. They took it out because we didn't have enough funds to.
okay, so that's a little different than
But it was
what-
at the tail end of the Amoresco project. They said, we did everything, but you guys need to get your pneumatics done
Right.
and your valves replaced.
Okay,
And this
but
is
that-
what this is.
But the Amoresco project was actually funding based on what our agreement was with Amoresco in terms of long-term funding on this. Okay,
I will pull that back out and send it to you guys before the meeting next week, so that everybody.
I mean, that's helpful, but it's still not funded by them. This is something above and beyond. So I would also like to see some information about cost savings with utilities on this. But again, I can't support this until I see the breakup. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Paulson. Has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed?
No,
Roll call, please, Pam.
Friedlieb. Paulson.
no,
Beyondich. Johnson.
Aye.
Aaron Huffy.
Aye.
Baraboo.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-1. Thank you. So before we go to the next item on the agenda, I see that there may be a couple of items that'll be some more significant discussion. So let's just take 5 minute break here. Might be a good idea to do so. Thank you. Okay, thank you, everybody. We're back online. We took a really short break to accommodate some needs. So we will continue on with the rest of the committee of the whole agenda packet, and we'll move to, back to our city administrator, Britzi Bennett, for item 5 under building and grounds.
Thank you. Item number 5 is an update on 410 Fifth Street South.
Do we have an update, Brian, with respect to this property? It seems to be the, with the lack of a better term, the poster child for a lot of issues we have in the city with respect to these kind of properties.
No formal update, Mayor, though I can relay that I have been in contact with a counsel for Mr. Toman, and we're still in the notice period.
Okay, thank you. So the clock is ticking.
It is.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments regarding the 415 update? I mean, the 410 Fifth Street South update. Okay, next item.
The next item on the agenda is a review of the contract for private development with Virginia Hospitality LLC. Good timing, John Sullivan.
Thank you. We'll, as John returns from his juggling his phone calls and his work, and he's back in the game here, so we're looking for some more information from our planning department coordinator, John Sullivan. John?
Thank you. My apologies. That's exactly what I was doing. Thank you, Mayor. What you have in front of you is a private contract for development by and between the City of Virginia and Virginia Hospitality LLC, which is the hotel. For people from the audience not familiar with this, this is a new Marriott Hotel, 132 unit that's being proposed at the former Miners Memorial Building site. If you're wondering why we have another development agreement, we passed a development agreement back in the fall, along with establishing a TIF district for this. The reason for this is that very thing. We have a private contract for development that's associated directly with the TIF. That's why this is being put together. The deal hasn't changed. Everything's still in motion. The only thing I need to have done is, the legal description is not in here because Brian Lindsay and Britt and myself are working with Matt Reed on redoing this because we're going to dedicate 6th Street and we're going to shuffle a couple things around, but the property is still the same 5-acre development site. So while I'm here, I'm just going to pass that out. For memory purposes. Still the site. With a few tweaks. Brian's office, Brian and Patty Thornton are working.
If it's a TIF district.
That?
I need one of those.
Well, anyway, I spoke too soon. I missed one. So anyway, so what we're doing is, that certificate of survey in front of you, depending on what happens, may look a little bit different. So I'm going to work with Brian in his office to see how we can adjust. That's the only thing really hanging out on this thing. The rest of the terms in the agreement are the way it was adopted for the TIF plan, if you remember when Tammy Amdahl was here. So the only work we have to do is to finalize this agreement, finalize the development parcel, and then we will provide the request for certification of the district to the county. And Britt and I have already started the paperwork with Tammy to get that done. So I guess with that, I will leave it up for anybody with any questions.
A couple quickly. Are we looking to reapprove this agreement? Right?
We have not adopted this agreement yet.
We have not?
No, this is your first
Okay, so.
look at it, and we will be bringing this back on the 24th. And if we don't have all the information for that we're comfortable with, we could wait a little bit yet, but I'd like to get this resolved fairly soon.
Very good. Thank you, John. And just one more question from my perspective. I'm sure the council, myself, are getting a lot of questions as to when are they going to begin the construction of the hotel. So as we move forward, if all the ducks fall in a row and we do everything as anticipated, it's going to be done within the timely manner, or do we anticipate potentially an estimated time which you'll see a shovel in the ground? Would that be sometime in the fall?
Mayor, thank you. The developer would like to start construction of the site work sometime in the middle part of July, if possible, if we
Very
can get
good.
the financing put together. But, for sure by the fall, they want to start construction at the latest would be fall.
Thank you, John, very much. Counselor Paulson, then we'll go to Counselor Bearable.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much, John, for all the work both you and Britt and Brian have done on this. I know it's a long time in the making. Question I have is this development agreement, is there anything different or changed in this agreement compared to the other one, with the exception of the TIF language?
No, it's still the same agreement. The only thing we were waiting for, Counselor Paulson, was a certification from the developer on what their site development costs were.
Okay,
And we have those now, and those have been entered into the agreement. If you'll recall, it's a pay-as-you-go TIF district where each year they have to show us that they have expended these amounts for these site development costs. And as you've seen, their site development costs are very extensive. So those get reimbursed on an annual basis through the TIF district that we established.
perfect. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Thank you, Counselor Paulson. Counselor Bearable?
John, have we actually certified the district? I don't remember us doing that. We haven't done that yet, have we?
We have
What's that
not.
going to take? Is that going to take Veterans Edition and all that area there? Where's it going to take the shopping mall area too? Because it usually gets spread across the taxpayers that are in that district. Or are we going to do it citywide district?
No, Counselor Baraboo, we established TIF District 6.1 in the fall, and that's specific just to the former minor site. It's not a
Okay,
area.
it's not a
no,
spread only like we used to have.
That is correct.
I've
It's
been
it's a
against TIF
specific
districts.
development parcel.
Yeah, I've been against TIF districts just because of that issue I just brought up. Has this survey and stuff been certified with the county and the state yet? Or is this still coming?
No, we're still working on those items with our city attorney, and
Okay.
fairly soon we should have that information because we need to clear up a couple things on the survey and on, we have two easement releases that we need to finalize. The land has been sold, but there's still a couple title issues we're working through, and I think we should be there hopefully by next week, but, we'll see how it progresses.
So we'll have to act on that then in the future then, just to make sure it gets sent down properly.
Yes.
Okay, thanks, John.
Thank you, Counselor Bearable. Any other questions, comments? It'll be brought back around the 24th. So does anybody else have anything, any questions or comments regarding this item on the agenda?
Mayor, I'm going to make a motion. We move this item to the council meeting on the 21st for final vote on the new agreement.
Will that
That's what
give
you're
you?
looking for, John, right?
Okay, motion by, you can do that by the 24th potentially?
Potentially.
All right, so moved by Counselor Bearable. Is there support? Support by Counselor Freely. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Item number 7 on the agenda is a request for a petty cash drawer at the Iron Trail Motors Event Center.
Brian, Park and Rec Director, good morning once again. Welcome.
Welcome, or thank you. We are requesting that the city council approve us to have a petty cash drawer at the Iron Trail Motors Event Center. As you may be aware, we already have additional cash drawers for our registers in the concession stand. But what we are running into is the need to have another drawer in the office for when people come in to pay for memberships or pay for park rentals. We've run into the instance several times of not having change, where most of our items that the public purchases from us are even dollar amounts. There's this fun thing called tax, and once the tax comes on there, we have to develop change, and we do not have that. So we're asking for a small petty cash drawer in the office that we would be able to make that change out of and reconcile and submit just like we do all of our other cash boxes.
Thank you, Counselor. Comments here in momentarily, but Brian, just